Hello, everyone. We are still here at the Supper Suite at South by Southwest, and I am so excited that Blue Moon is helping us out this time because it means that we get to cover movies like Body at Brighton Rock. And right now, I have the director here, Roxanne Benjamin. Thank you so much for coming by today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I have so many questions for you that hopefully I get to most of them. But one of the things that I remember reading when you were promoting XX was that you had a bunch of feature projects kind of in the works and they were looking for financing. So one, what was that process like for you? And two, what was it like when you found out this one got the go-ahead?
Well, I hadn't written this one yet. Yeah, at the time. When I was at Sundance with XX, I had another movie that I had written that was a kind of bigger budget, more grand scale feature. And I spent like a year trying to get that together, and the financing kind of fell through at the last second. And I've made a movie every year since producing the first VHS movie in like 2010. So I was kind of losing my mind a little bit. So I wrote this. I sat down and wrote this like the week I found out that our financing had fallen through on the other movie, the bigger movie. And went to my post-production house, the producers I had worked with before at Soapbox, Dave Smith and Chris Allender, and presented it to them as this very low-budget movie with just like one girl. It's like a chamber piece, you know, she's all by herself, it's her, and, you know, this body that she finds, and it'll be like no big deal at all, very low budget. And they're like, great, let's do it. Finished writing the script, and then I took it over to Magnolia and pre-sold it to them, and then was like, oh wait, I just wrote a movie about a girl in the middle of the wilderness on the side of a mountain in winter with lots of very messed up things happening in the elements as my like small movie to make before the bigger movie. And it's sounds like a simple premise and simple concept, and like you're dealing with like one person, but there's so much that happens. It's actually way bigger than it sounds like on paper.
I have a million production questions as well, but just because I think it's always beneficial for people to hear things like this, what do you do when you run into failure like that? Because I just love hearing people's stories about having a problem and then overcoming it, and especially when we're talking about making a feature film, which is, in my opinion, next to impossible and quite the achievement when you can do it.
It's like not until you make any sort of film on your own that you start to really respect every other movie that you may have taken like for granted, or if it had some sort of flaw, however small, and you were like, that wasn't as like good as I expected. You're like, every movie is a miracle of any kind that it comes together and actually gets made. And it's funny how you put that, because like someone overcoming failure is actually what the movie is really about, is someone overcoming like their own sense of failure through a series of being tested in ways that like they didn't know that they could be tested and would come out more on the positive side, or for better or worse, through the experience, however bad it might be. And when it comes to like production, every kind of failure is a new opportunity to find something in the movie that you didn't know needed to be there. Is really the way I look at it.
Absolutely. What was it about the park ranger lost in the woods scenario that really spoke to you, especially given the fact that like you wrote this so quickly too? Yeah. How did that come to mind?
Well, I was working in a park, and a lot of the people who worked there were just like part-time students. You know, it's like their summer job kind of thing. And I spent a lot of time in like the national parks with my dad. We go camping a lot. We go hiking a lot, like every year to all the national parks. We usually hit like one a year for like a couple days or a week. And it's very easy to get out in the middle of the wilderness and you have no cell reception. And like there's a real reason, like in a horror movie, for there actually to be no cell reception. And things can go from like, oh, we're just having a pleasant day, to dire very quickly. And I also grew up in rural Pennsylvania in the woods. So that's kind of more what I'm used to, and like it's more like home to me, which is why most of the things that I write take place outside in nature, especially when you're dealing with low budget and you don't have a lot of money to put into like production value. Letting nature be your production design, along with, I mean, I have amazing production designers, the Andujar twins who worked on this movie, but letting kind of nature be the palette that sets the tone of the movie is something that I try to work into almost everything I do.
Given your experience in this realm, have you ever gone through something that obviously isn't exactly like what we see in the movie, but anything kind of frightening at all that you were able to work into this character?
I've definitely gotten lost in the woods before. And it takes like a very short amount of time before you're like, this is my life now. I'm going to have to learn how to like skin animals and eat them. And like, I'm going to just, you know, have to like build a lean-to and try to remember like Girl Scout knowledge that like, you know, we weren't like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts when I was a kid. We're very separate. Like the Boy Scouts got to learn like how to build fires and like, you know, like trap things. And like we were learning how to like sew buttons onto stuff from what I remember, you know, but this is like a long, long time ago. I'm sure it's much more diverse now. But yeah, it's definitely a situation I've been in, or even just camping alone at night where every little bump you're convinced is like either someone coming to kill you or like something in nature that is coming to kill you. So it's either someone or something. Really, I should not be alone in the woods at all, given like my amount of paranoia. But like, since that's how I grew up, like these were the kind of fears that I know how to present, I guess.
I'm not experienced in camping, but I feel like my mind automatically goes there because I've watched just too many horror movies since I was like a teeny tiny child.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like it's all preparing me though. Maybe I'm better off for it.
Yeah. It was also like with this movie, I feel like we all like, it's funny because I've asked people in like audiences or even just when they've seen the movie, like if they had read a book in junior high called Hatchet, which...
Oh my God.
Right?
I did read that book.
I don't know why all of us read this book. Like everyone had to read this book for some reason. And it was about this boy who was like, you know, his plane went down and he has like daddy issues. And there's like, he's left with just this like one tool that he has to like get out of the wilderness and like find himself.
I have not thought about this book since probably when I read
like,
it.
At a formative age, like we all read this book and that kind of book. Or like the Jack London books, you know, which were always very like rugged man versus nature kind of things and like finding yourself in nature. But I feel like there were not a lot of female character driven stories like that. And I wanted there to be. So this is kind of my version of that. It's like a mix of that. And like, I read a lot of like Christopher Pike as like a, you know, young kid at a much too early age probably. So I was trying to make something that was much more almost like young adult horror fiction or young adult psychological thriller than an actual adult horror movie.
I needed more of that as a kid.
Yeah, right?
Instead I was going for straight the adult, super hard R. And here we are today.
Yep. And here we are.
I wanted to know about making this specific character too, because one of the things that I appreciated about her most is like she felt very, very much like obviously she doesn't really know what she's doing. She shouldn't be on that trail, but also she's someone who constantly makes mistakes for a good degree of the movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I thought that was like a very bold choice because oftentimes we see something like this and so soon into the movie, you're given confidence like, no, they can do it. It'll be okay. And you don't really do that. And I think it keeps you on edge a little more.
Yeah. It's like it's a delicate balance because I didn't want Wendy to seem like completely incompetent. The idea is that like she's figuring out that she can do these things. It's like someone who doesn't have confidence in themselves realizing that they can actually survive something, which I feel like is a very universal story that people should tell.
It's like making movies. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had the conversation of should I go to film school or should I just get out there and learn? And sometimes you're fumbling around round one, but it does help you learn.
And it's also, if that was a real person in this scenario, they're not going to instantly turn into like, you know, Little Miss Wilderness, you know? And again, it's like a lot of people who kind of work in these part-time jobs for the summer, it's like you don't have, like, you're not like wilderness trained, you know, like it's not expected that you're going to get stuck somewhere for like a night or 2 nights. It's like you're going to be on a trail for a couple hours, like things should be fine. But it's kind of this razor thin edge I think we all walk on that like things could teeter into calamity so much more quickly than we kind of walk around thinking that they could. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore, like what happens when everything goes wrong. And some of it's her fault and some of it isn't. And then it becomes a little bit of a comedy of errors. And I don't know how to make things without some sort of comedic tone to them. So I wanted her to kind of be in on that rather than like the butt of that.
Have you thought much? Because I'm sure you love all horror movies like I do. And one of the things that it gets me thinking about all the time is like what I would do in the face of like an emergency in a split second like that. So like whether it's camping or all of a sudden turning around and seeing a slasher behind you, have you ever tried to process like, would I be okay in this situation?
I don't know. It's like when you work in this genre, it's what you think about in every scenario. Like there's always someone under the bed. There's always someone behind the shower curtain. Like you can't close a mirror on a cabinet ever. Like you have to turn around and look first. So we're probably uber prepared, or we're just like in a constant state of fight or flight, one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty accurate assessment right there.
Yeah.
Going back to the tone, I was wondering how you figure out that balance here because, I mean, it almost also has like a little bit of a Western tone to it also. Did you have that set right from the start or were you figuring out as you went along?
No, that was definitely part of the tone the whole way through. I wanted this very like 70s girl out on her own against the elements, going on this journey, and the kind of Western thriller vibe, but set in the woods, was something that I hadn't really seen before. And the whole color palette was designed around that. The fact that there's like an opening coda was designed around that. And my composers, The Gifted, are amazing. I've worked with them on a couple of different projects now. They did my Southbound score and my XX score. So they're really great at like being able to meld these different tones together. And we took a lot of time figuring out like what those themes would be and where we would marry them, and just giving it this kind of very, I don't want to say vintagey or nostalgic tone, but it's like I was trying to make a 70s TV movie that didn't exist that I wish I had seen in my childhood.
I could see that touch.
Yeah.
Speaking of XX, Southbound, you've also had more producing experience beyond that, but this is your first feature as a director. So even with all that experience, was there anything with the making of this movie that made you think like, how did I not know that before?
Not really, honestly, because I had worked on so many features with so many different directors at that point that there wasn't anything that was so much of a surprise as it was just, I wish we had more time, which I think is what everyone thinks. But, you know, we had 11 days to shoot the movie up on the side of a mountain in winter. And there was a windstorm up in Idlewild where we shot that like they invented a new category of storm for that shut down the power in the town for 2 entire days. So we couldn't shoot and like couldn't run generators. Trees were coming down. Like it was bad. So we ended up shooting for like 9.5 days, and then plus an extra day 2 months later that was already planned ahead of time. That would be a big spoiler if I talked about, but it has to do with the ending of the movie. That was like pre-planned to be a later date. So we ended up like just having like an 11.5 day shoot, I think, by the end of it over the course of like 3 months. So just having more time, I think, would have been the one major thing. You know, I made this movie for less than the first VHS movie, which was a found footage movie made in 2010. And that's kind of like what the amount of financing that I could get.
That is all crazy. And so impressive that you pulled it off. How long were those days for 9.5 days?
Well, they're only, like production days are typically 12-hour days. Yeah. So we were never really going over from our production schedule. But they definitely felt longer because we were hiking the whole time too. We were hiking up and down the side of I say mountain. It is an actual mountain, but we were in like a park, a state park up in Idlewild in California, which is about like 6,500 or 7,000 feet above sea level between Los Angeles and Palm Springs. It's very much like Big Bear, California, but it's this small like mountain town. There's like one road in and out. So we were having to hike up and down like the side of the trails every day. And then, you know, it's also like we're in the dark on the side of the mountain too. So there's like a lot of safety stuff that you have to deal with. That was like a big part of planning the shoot as well.
Is there anything super, like that might look super simple to a viewer watching her climb some sort of rock face that actually came with a lot more complications than anyone would imagine?
Mostly I would say it was just the night stuff. Because putting the night stuff together when, you know, you're in the clearing on the side of a mountain, You have to get your lights up higher, and the winds were so crazy. It was like tying down our lights was one of the harder things. That and hoisting my DP up into a tree.
Oh,
yep.
my.
We literally tied her to a tree branch and left her up there.
Oh, man.
But also Casey Adams, who's also in the film, he's a stunt coordinator and stuntman. So I cast him in a lot of things, and he is very knowledgeable about like what can't be done. And we have other stunt coordinators involved in the film as well that are friends of his. But one of the reasons I like casting him, besides the fact that I think that he's a good actor, is that he's very aware of how to do a lot of things like that in a safe way, and to help other people kind of feel comfortable doing those things. Mostly climbing on the rocks was like more treacherous for like us, like as the crew, I think, than the cast, because like we had them placed very carefully, but the rest of us had to like get those shots around them. And there are a lot of shots up there that are like kind of on the precipice.
But this is a quick and easy film for you to shoot,
yeah,
so it's
just
gonna
like
be
one
fine.
person, one location, mostly daytime, like easy peasy.
No big deal.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how all those conversations begin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So given your experience on this now, like where is your mind at just in terms of future projects? Are you basically back in another situation where you've got a whole bunch of other things out there and cooking and you're kind of waiting for something to go?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, that's the name of the game. Like every time you just start over from scratch and hope that you can get a little bit bigger budget every time. It's weird to think that this is my first feature, because it feels like I've been directing for so long.
Yeah.
But I forget that it's just like pieces of anthologies that I've directed. And I just finished writing a script for Orion, the remake of Night of the Comet.
Yes.
So that's done. So now I'm just looking for new projects.
I feel like the tone of that seems so much more perfect for you now that I've seen this.
Makes a little more sense.
Do they align at all just in terms of the style?
I really like writing stories about female relationships and female dynamics in terms of friendships, because I find them fascinating, and I feel like it's something that I want to see explored more for characters that are of a younger age. Comedy, I feel like there's a lot more like straight comedy stuff that is geared towards like late 20s, early 30s, but you don't see it as much in like teen age or like more like YA that deals with like real life things while also having a comedic tone to it, or comedic undertones. So that's kind of where I feel like that's my lane.
Okay. I like the sound of that. And is there anything that you learned making this movie that you're going to take with you, or something that's kind of drilled in your mind now?
You learn so many things on every single movie that you make that you didn't know before. And it's weird. Like every person has a completely unique experience when it comes to how they make films, or like the knowledge that they have based on the problems that you had to solve on the prior film. And for this one, I honestly think it's just dealing with like a single character and how to build a single character narrative. Karina Fontes, who's the star of the movie, this is her first feature. She'd never acted in a feature before.
I don't know why I kind of like wiped that away, because I knew she was in Southbound.
Yeah, but she's the band member in Southbound in my section that no longer exists. That she's the one that's missing, that they're all talking about all the time, and then she shows up in like the nightmares and stuff, but she doesn't have any lines. She's not like a real character in the film so much as she's a presence in that film. So this is like her debut acting role. So it was also working with like a first time actor in that capacity, and she carries the film. The whole film is based around her.
Really threw her in the deep end too.
Yeah, I was like, here you go. We're both just gonna like dive in here. I'm
fine.
sure it'll be great. Yeah.
Right. One more thing I wanted to ask you about is just the idea of ladies in horror, because obviously I'm like a horror nut, and the community is very important to me. And ever since you started working on the VHS films, your name has been a major one in that community. So where do you see kind of like ladies in horror going right now? I know it's a very broad question, but I just kind of like highlighting any like bright potential future that this genre and specifically female filmmakers have in it.
I hope to see more opportunities for all independent filmmakers. I think I feel like there's a lot more directing opportunities than there used to be. Potentially, like I always think of like the people that I liked when I was kind of coming up who were more on the producerial side of things, and it feels like there's definitely more women taking the step into directing, and it feels like it's more accessible now to everyone, which I think you can't really go wrong with that.
Absolutely. Is there anything happening in the genre this year that's really exciting you? A movie you're looking forward to? Something that you just saw that really made a big impression?
Funnily enough, I haven't seen anything for a while because I've been making this. You're kind of in a rabbit hole when you're making a movie and finishing a movie where you're just like, I looked up and I was like, oh, the Oscars are happening, and like had completely forgotten. So there hasn't been anything that's really been on my radar so much as I'm very excited about Pet Sematary, Dennis and Kevin's movie.
As am I.
And Us, Jordan Peele's new movie. I was trying to figure out, like, can I skip my own, like, pre-premiere party to go see Us? Like, I can't do that, can I? But it was the only time it was playing, so.
At least it's well worth the wait.
Yeah. I was like, they would understand. They would understand. So, yeah, I'm definitely excited to see those.
Good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for coming by today to talk body at Brighton Rock. Keep an eye out for it. Roxanne, thank you again. Hope you have a great South by Southwest. Guys, we will be back at the Supper Suite real soon with more interviews.